Aloha, everybody. Welcome to the Hawaiiverse podcast, a podcast that supports local by understanding that nothing is more important than ohana. I'm your host, Kamak Diaz, and... Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that just brought back some memories for you. Before we introduce our legendary guest, I just want to remind you to head over to Hawaiiverse on Instagram to win a $100 gift card to our Hawaiiverse website, where you can buy thousands of local products from local businesses and help us in our mission of supporting local. So head over to Hawaiiverse on Instagram now to enter. Okay, let's introduce our guest. Our guest today is an accomplished Native-Hawaiian Chinese visual artist, musician, vocalist, recording artist, composer, poet, author, producer, director of audio, film, and video works, hailing from the Big Island of Hawai'i. He is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Hawaiian Kingdom and serves as a strategist and spokesman for the reinstatement of the Hawaiian Kingdom. In 2017, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He is the only Hawaiian composer whose work was recorded by the prestigious London Symphony Orchestra. He has composed soundtrack music for several award-winning documentary films, including the 1977 National Geographic documentary, The Voyage of the Hōkūleʻa. You may have heard him and his partner Malia singing songs focusing on promoting Hawaiian culture while you were growing up. He is a living legend. His name is Leon Kaulahao Siu. Aloha, Leon. Welcome to the podcast.
Aloha.
How you doing?
Good to be here. Mahalo for that introduction.
Of course. Mahalo for coming. I'm really excited to have you on today and to learn about your life, your history, and the Hawaiian history, because you're just a wealth of knowledge. You have so much knowledge.
Well, mahalo. I'm glad to be able to share that. And really, mahalo for your program. Mm-hmm. I've been able to catch a few episodes, and wow, this is wonderful what you're doing.
Mahalo. Yeah, it's exciting to be able to share stories with the local community and figures who have been around for a while, upcoming figures that are doing really amazing things. And you've been around for a long time, over 50 years in the spotlight. You look so good. You don't age. I don't know. It must be the Chinese, right?
It must be the Chinese part. Yeah. Still have my hair.
Yeah, it's so incredible. And I think a lot of people might not even remember or recognize you until they hear some of the songs, because even me, when I heard some of the songs, I was thinking, this sounds so familiar. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. So the song I played, my niece grows up listening to these songs. My sister-in-law grew up listening to these songs. The Calabash Kids on YouTube, you can find it, right?
Right.
Yes. It's so awesome.
It's been a pleasure, and the music has always been part of my life. I grew up with music all around us, as little kids, So in Miloli'i and whatever, we always had parties, and families would just haul out their ukuleles and guitars and start playing. And it was amazing because, we just took it for granted. Everybody played music.
Yeah.
And knew all kinds of songs. I mean, country western songs and pop songs and all kinds of stuff. Hawaiians are very eclectic in their musical tastes, and also participated quite a bit in musical genres. Even over time. So when Hawaiian music, or when Hawaiians first got introduced to music to the international population, we're playing Hawaiian music, but we were also playing things like jazz and all that. And Hawaiians were all over the place, playing all kinds of instruments around the world, in movies and all kinds of places like that. Recordings with the great bands and things like that. There were Hawaiians in many of those orchestras.
That's really interesting, because I think when people think of Hawaiian music, they think of the ukulele, the slacking, very, basic, like, same, like, 3 or 4 chords that they use. But it's good to know that they had a very diverse music taste and talent, music range.
Right. In the 1950s, for instance, Hawaii was, and actually before the war also, but in the 1950s, Hawaii became quite a jazz center. And if you listen to the Hawaiian music of that time, so many jazz chords and progressions and things like that. Gabi Pahinui was actually a famous jazz player before became known as a slide key artist.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
And Arthur Lyman and people like that were incredible jazz players.
Must have been so cool growing up, seeing that and being around that scene. And I have so many questions to ask you and a lot of things to get into, but I always like to start at the beginning. And the classic Hawaii questions: where are you from, where you grad, and what was it like growing up?
Okay. I'm from the little tiny fishing village called Miloli'i in South Kona on the island of Hawaii. And I was born in Hilo, but we lived in Miloli'i at the time. So I grew up my first few years in Miloli'i. And then eventually we moved to Hilo when I was attending first grade. And I got all my education in Hilo, so I graduated from Hilo High School.
Home of the Vikings.
Yeah, and but in Hilo I also got my musical background, besides playing in parties and stuff like that. Our school, the elementary school I attended was Waiakea School.
Oh,
and Waiakea had an ukulele band at that time. And almost everybody, 500 students in the school, almost everybody above the second grade played ukulele. And we had an ukulele band of 350 that we used to play at the music festivals.
Wow.
And like that. So anyway, my immediate exposure or learning music was at Waiakea School, along with hundreds and hundreds of other young students. Then most of us continued playing instruments throughout our lives. So we graduated eventually to guitar and things like that. So I started playing music when 6 years old or something like that, and then played guitar from about 10 and on. Got very much involved in the American folk music revival that occurred in the 60s, which also drove the protest movement of the 60s and the counterculture movement of the 70s and things like that. So I was very much exposed to and played a lot of the music of American folk music, the revival of folk music, but also kept Hawaiian music from small kid time. And so it was pretty much of a natural fit, Hawaiian and folk and like that. So I attended the University of Hawaii for 2 years in Hilo. I majored in art. I was actually a trained painter. I started taking painting the same time I started playing music, 6 or 7 years old. And so I enrolled in the master's painting class at the UH when I was a freshman there. My freshman and sophomore year I was there, and then it was only a 2-year university at the time, or college at the time. And so I had to move to Honolulu. But in Hilo, I also started playing music while attending the university, playing professionally. So I played at this place called the Islander Nightclub, and I was their featured entertainer there. And I played Hawaiian and folk music. And then there was a regular band that did dance and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, out of that era, I got to know a lot of the other professional musicians in Hilo, the Kalima family, George Naope, and all that. And so we all began to hang together and visit each other's gigs and things like that. So it was quite a nice community of musicians. And so then I moved to Oahu. I came to Oahu in 1968 to attend the university, again in the master's painting class. And so that I didn't have classes on campus at the UH. They had a special house set aside way up in Manoa Valley, just before the Manoa Falls, the last house before Manoa Falls. And that was dedicated for about half a dozen of master painter classes. So I had a number of friends. People are still friends of mine to this day. We painted in that house. So anyway, so I also was playing music in Honolulu, particularly in Waikiki, and of course in the pubs and things like that around the university. So
while you were going to college?
Well, I was going to school. Yeah.
Was that just to pay the bills, or just something you just loved doing it?
For both, yeah. It hardly paid the bills, but because a lot of it was just the coffee houses and things like that. You just show up and play for food or whatever. But it was a great experience because I got to meet a lot of other musicians in Hawaii at the time. And, of course, then I started playing in Waikiki at several of the bars and places like that in Waikiki or dinner houses. In 1969, I started playing at Chuck Cellar, which was a famous, it was a steakhouse or prime rib house on Lewis Street. Mm-hmm. And so I was the entertainer at late night. Early in the evening was a guy named Jay Laren, who is also a wonderful Hawaiian composer. So he played piano earlier during the dinner hours, and then I came in around 10 o'clock and started playing just whatever I wanted for the bar patrons. So in 1969, I was playing there for a few months when Malia, who I had met several years earlier when I was still in Hilo playing music at Islander nightclub, she was with a traveling theater group that came to Hilo to do some performances. So after one of their performances, they came to the Islander nightclub, and I was playing there, and so that's how we met. And then so a couple of years later, I'm playing in Waikiki. She's in California doing theater, different California troops there. And so her contract was up one time, and so she came back to Honolulu. And a friend of mine picked her up at the airport because I was playing that night, and she came in late at night. And so brought her to Chuck Cellar, and I called her up on stage to sing a couple songs. So she sang a couple songs, and the manager liked it so much he hired the both of us as a team.
Oh, wow.
So her first night back in Hawaii, we were hired as a team. So we had a gig. And so a couple of months later, we went to San Francisco to audition for a San Francisco nightclub called Purple Onion. And so the Purple Onion, which was very famous as a folk and comedy club, and people like the Kingston Trio, and older people remember these names, Peter, Paul, and Mary. No, Peter, Paul, and Mary didn't start there. They started in New York. But Kingston Trio and a bunch of others, and the Smothers Brothers, Jim Neighbors, and Phyllis Diller, all of these comedians and musicians got started at the Purple Onion. So we headlined there from 1970 to 72, close to 72. And then we were hired back to Waikiki by a dinner house called Summer House and JB's Grill. So this was a dinner house and a disco. JB's Grill was more of a disco.
And none of these places are here now. They all closed down.
No, but the buildings, of course, are still there. So this was at the Colony Surf Hotel, which is still there, where Michelle's restaurant is. And so anyway, so that's what kind of brought us into the limelight again in Honolulu. So and at that time also the Diamond Head festivals were starting up, 1972, 71, 72. So we performed at those Diamond Head festivals. There was a couple of times when we were actually in San Francisco, and they would fly us back to perform at the festivals. Wow! And this is before it got really big, you know. But we played there with people like Linda Ronstadt and a bunch of stars that came in, Richie Havens, Miles Davis. Anyway, a whole bunch of people who were at Diamond Head festivals.
Were you playing original music or covers?
We're playing half.
Okay.
Yeah, half covers.
A lot of the original songs that are on videos with the kids are different?
No, that came like
that's a specific
20 years later.
Oh, that was 20 years later.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is the early music
early
career.
70s.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was actually the children's music came in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So 10 years later. So anyway, so we were playing all over the place. During that period of time, also there was this awakening going on, not only the revival of Hawaiian music and dance, what we call now the Hawaiian Renaissance and language, but also an awakening as to the questioning about our situation, our political situation, and our land situation. So what was happening at this time was right after statehood, developers became much more interested in developing large parcels of lands. And so a lot of our people were displaced because all of a sudden these lands changed hands, or developers came in and bought out large pieces of land, or leased large pieces of land and developed them. And from the 60s until the 70s, it was like just rampant. There was nobody saying anything about it. But when it got to the point where they were evicting farmers from their lands out in what is now called Hawaii Kai, used to be called Cocoa Head. Yeah, so that was all farmlands, and not to mention the fish ponds and all that.
Yeah,
but
I heard a story about, what's it called, Island Davis, how they wanted to make that into a port to bring ships inside.
Yeah.
And that used to be like more of a sacred grounds over there.
Yeah, well, the entire area,
Yeah, the whole Mauna Lua.
Mauna Lua was a very sacred area, and of course a very productive area.
Wow.
But what happened was the KSB owned all of that.
What is KSB?
Bishop Estate.
Oh, okay.
Kamehameha School's Bishop Estate.
Oh, okay. Cool.
KSBE. Anyway, they owned all that, and they leased it to Henry J. Kaiser, who had developed the Hilton Hawaiian Village. And of course, he was a huge industrialist. You know, he's the guy, it was his company that put out the Jeep for the military and built tanks and that kind of stuff. And eventually Kaiser Aluminum, and then Kaiser Permanente Hospitals. Kaiser Permanente was a
Kaiser
cement.
High School, same guy?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so Kaiser was huge, and that's so Hawaii Kai is not named Hawaii Ocean. It's Kaiser. It's short for Kaiser.
Oh, what?
Yeah, because
Hawaii
he developed
Kaiser.
it, right. But in order to develop it, they had to evict everybody from the valley.
So did they call it Hawaii Kai just because it sounds Hawaiian? Kai.
No, because Kaiser named it that after himself.
He probably thought it made it sound more Hawaiian.
And it sounded
right?
Hawaiian.
Yeah, Kaiser.
Right.
Wow, I had no idea. That's a crazy
And
fact.
so hundreds of people were evicted from the valley, including Malia's family.
And this is because of Henry Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
where's he from?
Selling off the land. He was an industrialist from the East Coast, someplace.
So he just came.
But he fell in love with Hawaii during the war and decided to do the Hilton Hawaiian Village, which used to be called the Kaiser Hawaiian Village.
Wow. So he's a bad guy in this story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, who's bad or good? But the thing is, that's what happened. Now, KHVH, the radio station, was the Kaiser Hawaiian Village radio station. Anyway, so that's what it was. So Henry J. Kaiser was a very heavy influence during the 1950s and 60s. So they developed Hawaii Kai and evicted all these people. So that happened back in the 50s, started to happen in the 50s. But in the 1970s, they wanted to expand to Kalama Valley. And all over again, they were going to evict the farmers in Kalama Valley. And also made plans to develop resorts along the surf, along what they called at that time Queens Beach. And so Save Our Surf, which was an organization that started protesting that, and Save Kalama Valley, two groups, and met up, the kind of more environmental group and surfing group and the Hawaiian movement kind of linked up there at that time in the early 70s, 1972. And so we used to go out and play music for the protests, or get on radio and things like that and talk about what was going on. So during that period of time, it was a very, very formative time of the movement, what later became the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. Because it was during that time that we began to realize the problems with our land ownership, and how we knew we didn't own, quote, I'm making air quotes, own much lands, but at that time we didn't know what happened, why we didn't own these lands, and why we kept on getting evicted. a year or so later, Waiahole Waikani was a huge issue. They were going to evict all the farmers out of that to build a resort and golf courses and all that. And so the community there started up a very big protest, blocking Kamehameha Highway and all kinds of disruptions that were going on. And so we would be playing for all of these different events that they would have, myself and Liko. I got to tell a story about Liko Martin.
Yeah.
So I moved to Honolulu in 1968. I just got off the airplane, got into Waikiki. Had my guitar in one hand and my suitcase in the other hand, walking down on Kaulahao Avenue. And in front of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, there used to be a place called the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center, which is much, much smaller and quaint than what you see now as the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center. And so there were palm trees and lawn areas around these trees. So sitting at the base of one of the palm trees was this guy who pointed over to me and said, "Hey, brother, can you play that thing?" I said, yeah, sure. So I sat down, played some songs, and he said, "Where are you staying?" I said, "I don't have a place to stay. I'm just going to look around for a place." So he said, "Come stay with me." So I went, and he lived just a couple of blocks away in Waikiki. A lot of bungalows at that time in Waikiki.
Wow. So you came to Honolulu without a place to stay, without a plan? You just came?
Yeah, I just was going to go to the university.
Oh, okay, but you didn't have a place set up for you?
No, not yet.
What was your plan originally? You just...
Well, see what materialized.
And something did, which is really cool.
It's called Chansum, bro.
Yeah, Chansum. Chajum. Awesome.
And that's kind of been my philosophy, actually, the whole time. So over the years, I've been met with different challenges or presented with different challenges. And I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, let's do it." And anyway, so I met the person who invited me in was Hank Fergustrom. I'm not sure if you know that name. Very prominent name in the movement.
Okay.
And he passed away this past Saturday.
Oh, sorry about that.
But he was my first friend on Oahu. So a few days later, we were invited to a party down at the end of Waikiki. At the end of Kaulahao Avenue was a group of houses down there. And so some friend was throwing a party at the end. So we went there, took my guitar, was playing music, and in walks this other guy with a guitar, and it was Liko Martin. So within the first 2-3 days I was on Oahu, I met Hank Fergustrom and Liko Martin. And we became good friends at that point and actually lived together a few times here and there and were involved very much in the movement. So Liko and Malia and I would go and play for these different protest events all over the place. And it grew and grew. And of course, later that was Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana and all that. And Liko and some other Hawaiian activists at the time organized events at the palace.
Was George Helm involved?
George Helm was involved as well, yeah.
And like the Rite,
Walter Rite, yeah. But they were very busy with the organization. We would just show up to kako them, just to show our support and to get a little bit more publicity for their cause. Yeah. So that's how I got involved in the what became called the sovereignty movement.
And it was just through your music. So you really didn't even you weren't actually trying to really be involved. It just happened. It took a very natural course, and it was kind of just like your kuleana, right? As a Native Hawaiian, as you saw your music was a way to, share, to help out, to share knowledge with people, and just to even
and of course along the way you absorb what's going on, right?
And then you learn all this history. You see everything firsthand, and then you're like, well, this doesn't seem right. We should do something about it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And, the landing at Kaho'olawe and all of that, these were all people who I knew. Anyway, so the early parts of the what was called then the sovereignty movement which in 1993 actually became the independence movement after the apology by the U.S. In 1993.
Sorry, we're not going to do anything about it, though.
Yeah, well, it was like, sorry, let's talk about it. Let's try to resolve this.
Yes.
You know, and then, of course, nothing after that. And every action has been to actually clamp down on their claim of ownership to Hawaii. But anyway, that's the early story of how I got started in the movement. And it was through music. And music is still the driver.
Yeah, and you've been doing music the whole time, even as much as you've been involved in the
Hawaiian
Hawaiian
Kingdom.
And then, the Leon and Malia.
Right.
The duo is a very classic duo.
Yeah, and in the mid-'70s, we actually toured quite a bit. So we were all over the U.S., and playing college campuses. So this is where issues like Hawaiian sovereignty would be well received. So we'd sing a few songs like Kaulahao and things like that, introduce it. And so we were playing quite a bit around in the 70s throughout the U.S. Late 70s, my wife gets pregnant, and so we decided we're going to move home, have him born here, and we're going to raise him here. So we were doing all kinds of stuff. We were doing all kinds of recordings and studio sessions in L.A., but just decided it's better to raise our child back here at home, so he would have his roots here.
Nice.
Yeah, and so so that's what we did in 1978. We moved back to Hawaii after having toured for nearly 10 years since Purple Onion days and all that. Of course, we were back and forth and all that, but and that's when, soon after, about a year or so after, I ran into a friend at, by this time we had recorded 3 albums. And so I ran into a friend when I was shopping one day, and he said, a friend of mine, his family is, he got divorced, and his wife is taking his children and moving to Arizona or someplace like that. And he said, my friend is really upset about this because he doesn't want his girls to be raised without knowing about Hawaii. So he was thinking maybe we should help to sponsor a record with Hawaiian songs on it, so that for children, specifically aimed for children, so that his kids would not be separated from who they are.
And that's how the Calabash
And that's how Quakey Calabash got. Well, actually,
Calabash.
The first
Sorry,
recording.
I keep saying Calabash Kids.
Yeah, that's how the first recording was actually called Mokulana, and that was in 1979. That was released.
Wow.
And so Mokulana became our first children's album, and it actually we have a CD of it now. But it was released as a storybook album, so there was actually illustrated story, and you could read along, and it was narrated. And it was Saul Bright and who else? Skylark, Jacqueline Skylark.
Wow.
Yeah,
awesome.
Rossetti. Anyway, so they were the narrators, and then of course we had a bunch of children singing on it, and we released the recording. It was an instant success.
Well, there's nothing like it. That's why.
Yeah, but it was.
And it was in the midst of this huge renaissance going on.
Right.
So it was it filled this need.
Right.
For the community.
Right. And an area that's always overlooked, the children.
Yes.
It's just interesting. So we wrote this thing, and it became a huge success. And we still get letters from people who grew up listening to that recording, that long play album. And really touching letters, like, this saved my life, saying that they're like what we call now latchkey kids, coming home after school, nobody home, and they would put the recording on, and they would, be transformed into someplace else. And so it literally, saved their lives by reconnecting them. And so we thought, now this is really something, because what we're trying to do here is reconnect, or at least connect kids to something is all around them that we had kind of lost touch with in my generation.
Yeah. So you didn't grow up speaking Hawaiian. You were in the generation.
I didn't speak Hawaiian.
You were in the that missing generation where you couldn't learn it.
I was told I had to speak English.
Yeah.
In order to succeed, and I speak English quite well.
You do. You really do.
And it's helped me succeed. But I did not learn Hawaiian. Hawaiian was spoken around me. My mother was a fluent native speaker. And when she and her friends got together, man, they'd just fly.
Yeah, but they wouldn't teach it to you.
Speak Hawaiian.
Did you ever ask them to teach it to you?
A little bit, yeah. But again, at that point, I wasn't that interested in learning it. It was not until the 70s.
Yes, that's when it was reinstated as an official language, right? Does that have anything to do with why the Renaissance began in the 70s? It surrounded the language?
It has a lot to do, yes. Yeah, the language particularly. The music, the language. See, the interesting thing was that everything Hawaiian was being stamped out during the territorial days, except for the Hawaiian music and the hula, because those were commercial. They were able to commercialize that and get tourists here, and also commercialize it over movies and things like that. Yeah. So even though it was a bastardized form, if you watch some of those movies, some of our kumu hula snuck in some really good stuff.
Oh, nice.
When it was background things and all that.
Yeah.
But and so these films help to promote Hawaii, but they also help to preserve our music. So when tourists would come to Hawaii, they want to hear Hawaiian music, which is why you have Gabi Pahinui and Ata Isaacs and all of these great Hawaiian singers playing Hawaiian music and Hapa Haole music. Yeah. But they anyway, so that preserved our music, our lyrics, our language, things like that.
Which is how Hawaiian, as a language, was shaped. It was never a written language. It was an oral language.
Well, it was a written language. Well, it wasn't written until the Bible.
Well, I mean, when we would do our olis, our hulas, is all the way to recall our history, our mo'oku hau.
Yes, but actually, it's even before that. Because once Hawaiians had a written language, then they started recording everything. And as you know, there's been a huge project to recover the written pages of newspapers.
Yeah, the Nobel Hawaii.
Yeah. But even before that, you have Kamakau. You have who's the other great historian? Well, several historians.
Merriam-Webster Pukui? Yes.
Well, no, she was much later. Kamakau was back in the 1850s.
Oh, okay.
Where he recorded, ancient Hawaiian thing, all in Hawaiian. He wrote everything in Hawaiian, Hawaiian history and all that. So you get this great glimpse not a glimpse, but you get this knowledge and the language, how he wrote, as well as other great writers of the time. There were a number of proficient Hawaiian writers, including Kalakaua and Liliuokalani later.
And can we step back a little bit before moving forward? Because for some people listening to this, they may not know about the Hawaiian history.
Oh, yes.
Could we go back? So 1850s we're at that point, and then in 1893 we were overthrown. Can you tell us about that whole time and why the language was banned and who even reinstated Hawaiian as an official language in the 70s?
Yeah. Okay. So in the Captain Cook comes to Hawaii 1778. Yes, 100 years off. 1778. And of course, he's mistaken as Lono and treated as a god. And he comes back several months later with a demasted ship. He comes back into Kealakekua Harbor, where he had been treated so well before, but now he's eyed with suspicion because one, he's obviously not Lono, and then secondly, he gets into this skirmish with the Hawaiians, and this fight breaks out, and one of his men fires on the crowd that had gathered around on the Hawaiians, and anyway, so it turned out badly for Cook. He got killed. At that point.
And I just want to add this. This this is what I heard. They thought that he was a god because he was so pale and white, like a ghost, which they thought that meant he was a god, right?
And also, if you look at the procession of Lono during the Makahiki, it goes counterclockwise. It goes clockwise, around the islands, and they're holding up these big pu'olu'olu sticks with a cross beam and long streams of white kapa,
which seemed like the sails.
The sails. Wow. Yeah. So the ships. I mean, it was an obvious mistake, but it was understandable as well.
Yeah, it made sense.
This guy's got firearms and all kinds. This is so. But they soon, discover he's not a god. But they actually respect him as a chief. So his bones are treated with respect and divvied up to some of the people that there, and the rest sent back to England. With George Vancouver, who was the second in command. So the Hawaiians had no animosity toward the British, and of course Vancouver came back several times after that, and became kind of a close friend to Kamehameha.
Yeah, and before Captain Cook, there was no contact with Hawaii.
No, not there was some landing that was recorded by a Spanish ship in the 1500s, but there was nothing that we could latch onto. So there was no real contact.
Okay.
Probably all of the sailors died. Yeah. Anyway, so Captain Cook comes. He opens up Hawaii to outside. Kamehameha and other chiefs become very astute as to how they might be able to use this to their advantage. Of course, so Kamehameha, the wars break out, and Kamehameha is using these imported Western firearms, and so were some of the other chiefs that were opposed to him. So they quickly they upped the ante with their warfare. And so Kamehameha eventually, at Nu'uanu, he eventually defeats the Oahu forces, and which had teamed up with Molokai also. So he wins 1795. So he becomes the undisputed chief. The one disputed is Kauai. So Kauai is still not under Kamehameha. So then he starts to try to invade Kauai a couple of times. He gets repulsed, one by the weather, another by disease. And so he stops trying to do that, and instead just kind of lets things go. He becomes more of a statesman. He's trying to now unify the islands. So in 1810, Kaumuali'i from Kauai comes over, and he pledges his fealty to Kamehameha. Kamehameha said, fine, go back home, you can rule as before, but now you're under me. And that was the understanding, 1810.
So before that, he was trying to take over all the islands, and then he shifted gears, and he's like, I'm going to unite and bring people together instead of just...
Yeah, he did a political action.
Smart man.
Instead. Yeah, I mean, interesting person, because he was able to switch from one mode of action, from the warrior to a statesman. And not only a statesman, but to a man of peace. Yeah. Because he issues then the law of the splintered paddle, 1810. Everybody's got can move comfortably around the whole kingdom without being molested. Before it was, Anyway, so he actually flips a lot of the kapus. Just by what he was doing. So he passes away 1819. He passes away. So the crown gets over to his son, Lunalilo, and, Liho. So the son decides at one point, or is cajoled by Ka'ahumanu by the way, so Kamehameha starts up trade with foreign countries, and he's very good at it. The only thing is he kind of overpromises, And so one of the big disasters was his promise of sandalwood to the sandalwood traders taking it to China. And they over-harvested. And because of the king's edict, everyone drop everything, go up and harvest sandalwood. And they over-harvested. They left piles of sandalwood on the beaches undelivered to China.
What were they trading for?
Guns and
okay.
Other types of things that were coming. I'm not sure exactly what, but anyway. So by this point, Kamehameha, before 1819, Kamehameha is being courted by lots of different countries. They want favors, Russia and others. So the main ones were America and Great Britain.
Yeah.
And so to kind of settle the this hooky between the two of them and him, he designed the Hawaiian flag.
Oh, nice.
So the stripes representing U.S. and the Union Jack representing Great Britain.
Because they had a good relationship with British.
And so he basically, I'm going to honor both of you, same. And let's settle this. Neither of you are going to be one over the other. And that's how I'm going to treat you. So diplomacy as well. Wow. Statesmanship, diplomacy. So he settles this hooky between America and Great Britain by designing a flag and telling them, I'm going to treat you both equally. Yeah. Wow. And so you were going to ask about the flag, but that's how that design came about.
That's interesting.
So after Kamehameha passes away, his son takes over, and his son decides to, actually, the queens, Ka'ahumanu and Ke'opulani, decide to get rid of the kapu system. Because the kapu, if you recall, was very unfavorable toward women. So this was like a women's rights movement by two queens, who resented the fact that they were being treated like second-class citizens.
Yeah, they weren't able to eat in the same place as men. And
couldn't eat together, and could not eat certain foods, and do certain things. Anyway, so it was a very hierarchical society with men being highly favored. And so they resented that. They talked the young king into sitting down and eating with the women at Kailua, what it was called Honua, Kamaka Honua. This is the place. So he eats with the women, and this now is telegraphs and sends this huge message to Hawaiians that the king himself is not respecting the kapu. And the king, right after he does that, the high priest, Heva, comes up to Liho, and he says, now that you've offended or defied the kapus, shouldn't we also burn down or take down the heiau also? And so Kamehameha II gives his approval, and Heva, the high priest, goes and he burns down Ahuena heiau.
What's the point of that?
The point of that was they're switching religions.
So to Christianity?
Well, not yet. They don't know yet.
Huh.
It was an interesting thing. But basically, with the interaction with the foreigners, it becomes obvious that the kapu system is not right for their people, and so he orders all of the heiaus desecrated, and the heiaus burnt down. And so this happens all across Hawaii. And then this is on October 4th, 1819. October 20th, 1819, a ship leaves from Boston with missionaries aboard. They have no clue Kamehameha had died 6 months earlier. They had no clue that Hawaiians had overthrown the kapu system a few weeks earlier. They simply came on the invitation of a Hawaiian man named Henry Opukaha'ia. Okay, so, and that's a whole another story.
And he's the one who brought Christianity.
He's the one that begged the Christians from New England to come to Hawaii.
The missionaries.
To bring the gospel. Yeah, the missionaries. And so that first party of missionaries came. Took them 6 months to travel to Hawaii. They get to Hawaii Island. They're off the coast of Kauai when Heva, the high priest who has a home in Kauai, looks out and he says, a new god is coming. And so he helis on down to Kailua, where Kamehameha II is residing, and he tells them, prepare, the new god is coming. So the ship from Boston first lands with the missionary party at Kauai. And so Heva's wives tell him, he went down to Kailua, and by the way, the king is dead, and the kapu system is no more.
Like, what?
Yeah. So these missionaries are like, wow. Yeah. So they go to Kailua Kona, and they meet there with Kamehameha II and Heva, who's there. And Heva basically said, this is the new god coming to Liholiho. And Liholiho gives them a probationary period of 1 year. You can come and you can teach what you want to teach, do what you want to do for 1 year. If you do anything wrong, out you go. And so then the mission started there in Kailua Kona, the first one.
Wow. And it was just them trying to educate people, trying to convert them from, I just learned polytheistic or like
polytheistic.
Polytheistic and animistic. It was like that was the religion.
It wasn't really animistic. Well, it's sort of animistic in some
where
cases.
they praised deities and they saw different things of nature as gods, like the ocean, the
of course,
land.
So these Calvinist missionaries came, and in a way they're overboard in their own culture, right, which is a Puritan culture. And so these two cultures meet and they kind of clash initially. But eventually the missionaries begin to learn the language. Opukahi had already started writing a dictionary. Anyway, they begin to learn the language and they had, of course, the help of several others who were with them. Kaumoli'i's son, who they called George Tamure, was with them. He had come from Boston with them. And so was Thomas Hōpū, and one other person I can't remember. But there were 3 others that spoke Hawaiian fluently, of course. Were from Hawaii. And they helped the missionaries to get adjusted. So soon after, the missionaries started to learn the language.
How did they communicate before? I didn't even think about that, like when Captain Cook and it was just sign
Captain
language?
Cook had Tahitians with him.
Oh, so they communicated through another Austronesian language.
Yeah.
Wow, and just because of the similarities, they could understand like someone speaking Portuguese to someone speaking Spanish.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So the Tahitians were the first Polynesians, or in 500 years, to come to Hawaii.
Okay. Yeah. And then eventually we learned English. They learned Hawaiian, but it was mostly us learning English.
It was actually mostly us, them learning Hawaiian, because for years the official language in Hawaii was Hawaiian. Okay. And then of course a few scholars started to learn English, and the ali'i learned English as well.
And they would go to Europe.
But their prime language was Hawaiian.
So at what point did Hawaiian start to decline? Pre-overthrow?
Immediately after Captain Cook's. You mean the language?
The language, yeah.
The language?
Not the Hawaiian because of disease and stuff.
The language started to decline after the overthrow.
Okay, so after 1893.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Wow, so all this happened, and then fast forward, we had a couple more kings. We had Kalakaua. We had Queen Liliuokalani, who was appointed queen after Kalakaua passed away. So just hearing about all these things that you're mentioning, all these names and dates and the history, it reminds me of when I was learning in school as a keiki, and because I went to Hawaiian immersion school, but I just wish I had the same interest I have now in learning all this back then, because I forgot a lot about everything that you're telling me about, but the names and dates and the things that happened sound really familiar. So it's really cool to almost like relearn this kind of. It's just a refresher in my mind. And yeah, I'm having such a good time. I hope all the listeners are enjoying it too.
So it's easy to look at history in a very, how would you say, lineal way, when actually it's much more dynamic.
Yeah.
And so the coming of the missionaries, to some we say, oh, that was the downfall of Hawaii. But actually, in another way, it's the salvation of Hawaii, because they brought medicines and they brought things that they started to address the problems that were going on as far as the population decline and the disease that had started to run rampant. And so, they were there. But they also insisted on writing the Bible in Hawaiian. So in order to do that, they had to learn Hawaiian, and they had to listen carefully to the Hawaiian language speakers of the time. And so when you look at the Bible, it's one of the most extraordinary, the Hawaiian Bible, it's one of the most extraordinary documents, because it wasn't written from English translations. They actually went back to the Hebrew and to the Greek, of which the original Bibles are written.
Oh, so they translated
from Hebrew
to
into Hawaiian, from Greek into Hawaiian.
Wow, so that's why a lot of it's hard to do like literal English translations, or there's just some words that just don't have a real definition.
And it maintained the poeticism of the Hawaiian language, because a Hawaiian language is not a trade language, where a trade language is very specific and empirical, and it's a very how would you say artistic language, poetic language. Wow. And so if you read the Bible, it's written by people who actually knew the language, and they recorded in that. Then Hawaii became the most literate nation on earth by the 1850s.
Yes, fun fact.
Over 90% literacy, way more than any other country on earth. And it was literacy in Hawaiian. It wasn't in English.
Oh, that's
what
it
was literacy in Hawaiian.
Is it per capita?
Yeah. Yeah. Not per capita, 90-something% of the entire population could read. Yeah. And not only read, but did read and understand. And their main text was the Bible. Yeah. So they got this incredible book, of history and intrigue, this kind of stuff. And they knew all these stories. So by the 1850s, Hawaii was also the most Christian nation on earth, because the people converted into one. Now, I did some research, and of course we know about the kapu system, but we also know the kapu system was actually an implanted religion brought from Tahiti by a man named Pa'ao, who was a very powerful kahuna, and he brought in the Tahitian royalty and the Tahitian hierarchy, and implanted that here in Hawaii, and actually used force to supplant what was there before. So what was there before was a religion, and the name of the god, is a religion of one god, and the name of that god was Io,
which is the one true
creator, unalterably righteous God. And so this has been actually uncovered since around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. They started to discover this name or this occurrence of one God worship turning into polytheistic, so monotheistic into polytheistic. Oh. And then it came back again to monotheistic. But anyway, so what happened in Hawaii was there are certain elements that were certainly not from the kapu system, that had to have come from earlier religious belief, things like aloha and pono, and these fundamental words to us in Hawaii are actually much more ancient than the kapu system, and they actually are contrary to the kapu system, because if you look at the kapu system, the word aloha is not indicative of kapu. Kapu is much more rigorous and strenuous and legal. Aloha is not a legal term. It's a relational term.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, anyways, so with Christianity, people wonder, they thought, well, or they think, well, the missionaries came and forced this religion upon the Hawaiians. Actually, they couldn't force anything on the Hawaiians. Hawaiians were free thinkers,
Yeah, so I guess it was, in a sense, it was almost innate to them where it felt right, like, because
right. They
going back.
responded because it felt right.
Yeah, it felt pono.
And also, amongst those modern, or at that time, modern Hawaiians, they actually were people who actually knew the truth about the one true God before. One of them was Heva, the high priest of the kahuna, of the kapu system.
So he had no problem getting rid of the heiaus. He's like, finally, my time to shine.
The burning of the heiau, because he actually knew that this was a false religion that he had been the head of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Pa'ao brought this false religion through the Tahitians, to Hawaii, and then after Kamehameha I passed away, they kind of started to uncover the truth.
Yeah. But see, Kamehameha I himself started to undo the kapu, by saying everybody has the same rights to travel around the islands. So he already began to, and anyway, so he was the last proponent of the kapu, because he built what is the heiau, the whale, Mo'okini. No, not Mo'okini. He was dedicated to Mo'okini, but the big one, Pu'ukohola.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in Kawai'i. Yeah. That was the last heiau built, and was by Kamehameha. It was definitely a kapu, heiau.
Yeah.
A luokini heiau.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Hawaii became a Christian nation. Now this is really significant because there is this thing called the doctrine of discovery. I'm not sure if you know about that.
I've heard of it before.
Okay. So in the 1400s, Europe is now, taking over places like in Africa and all that. And so the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church Pope, issues these edicts, and they're called the papal bulls. And they basically say that Europeans have the right to seize any place because that is not inhabited by other Christians. In other words, savages and Saracens and whatever else they called them, heathens, could not own lands because so basically he gave license to the Europeans to go out and conquer lands because they were obviously not Christians. So all of North and South America, got taken, all of Africa.
All on the basis of Christianity?
On the basis of they weren't Christians. But actually it was greed. It was greed, but the excuse was that the church said they weren't Christians, we could take the lands. We have the blessings from God.
Yeah, so they said, well, God told us to do this.
It was greed the whole time. And sometimes greed on the part of the church too. They wanted some of that wealth. So these greedy explorers and conquistadors and discoverers were going around the planet claiming lands in the name of God and their king, and then of course reaping the benefits. Basically raping the lands and exploiting and killing people because they had license to do so. It was the godly thing to do according to these edicts from Rome. And so this is what the doctrine of discovery says. It says white European Christians can take lands from anybody they want to as long as they're not Christians too.
What?
Okay.
But that's on fine print.
That's actually what it says.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. But Hawaii became a Christian nation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I see where you're getting at.
1843, Kamehameha III, now Hawaii is a decidedly Christian nation already. And he sends his envoys to London and to say, listen, we're a sovereign nation. We're like you guys. Mm-hmm. We're the guys that are given license by the doctrine of discovery to exist, and we cannot be taken over. And sure enough, because Hawaii was a Christian nation, organized and at peace, Great Britain and France recognized Hawaii as a sovereign nation, the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign nation, meaning that they cannot, and neither can anybody else who, under the doctrine of discovery, can claim Hawaii. So that's why Hawaii was never colonized, because it was a Christian nation. And that's overlooked a lot of times by our historians, because they say, well, somehow these European countries decided to recognize Hawaii, just got it out of the goodness of their hearts. No, it was also because Hawaii was a Christian nation. It was like them, which also makes the overthrow in 1893, 50 years later, even more egregious, because we were a sovereign Christian nation. And the U.S. violated the doctrine of discovery as well as their own manifest destiny, things like that. So
I never knew about that.
Yeah, so Christianity actually saved our people and the integrity of our nation. The interesting thing,
but it didn't stop people from.
Well, the interesting thing about the Hawaiians is what we did with Christianity, is we actually took it seriously. If you look at documents like the Declaration of Independence, which is held up as a landmark visionary document, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. The Declaration of Rights, 1839 by Kaulahao says, all men are made of one blood. Now, what's the difference between the two? All men are created equal. It's a legal statement. All men are made of one blood is a relational statement. It means we belong to each other. We're relatives. There's a whole different way of looking at it. So the entire interpretation of what constitutes a Christian nation is much more consistent in the Hawaiian Constitution than it is in the U.S. Constitution or U.S. documents. The Hawaiian one is actually much more to the spirit of the laws of Jehovah. In fact, the Constitution, the first Hawaiian Constitution, 1840, says all laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom shall be consistent. It says it in the negative. It actually says, no laws in the Hawaiian Kingdom shall be contrary to the laws of Jehovah God. So they took it seriously that if this is a Christian nation, then they would behave the way the Bible says we need to behave. And we're the only country in the world that did that. The others all equivocated. Yeah, we're equal, but not the blacks, not the Indians, not that's the U.S.
Yeah.
Hawaiians
it
said,
makes
no,
so much sense.
We're equal.
It makes so
equal.
much sense with how diverse we are, how accepting we are to other cultures. The immigrants coming in, they were treated like ohana, not just visitors.
Right. Yeah. Because we're all of one blood.
Wow. We're all
profound.
We're all ohana, and the ohana isn't by blood. Oh, it's just the human race.
Yeah.
The human race. We're all one ohana.
Yeah. So not only was Hawaii a Christian nation, it was a profoundly Christian nation, like none other. And uncompromised in that way. And in a way, that's how we also was our undoing in the long run, because of our trust with other people and their laws.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so.
Wow. Well, so actually, what I want to do right now is, can we get into Instagram questions, because the first one is about occupation, so we can still continue heading into the overthrow while answering this question. So this one comes from crazy_wit_ak. So crazy with a K. That's pretty funny. What is the difference between occupation and usurpation? And usurpation, I had to look it up because I'm obviously not that smart.
Yeah.
Wrongful or illegal encroachment?
Yeah. Okay, very good question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because, and it's a bit, academic in the approach, but Hawaii is actually under usurpation. In other words, we've been forcefully taken over by somebody else. Occupation has a lot of different kinds of meanings, and the term occupation in modern terms, like when you look at the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, they define occupation. It becomes an actual legal, legal definition of what where we are. But it also there are legal occupations as well as illegal occupations. So if there are legal occupations, what are they? After a war, a country is defeated and it's being occupied by the country that defeated it, but the occupation is temporary. It means it goes, eventually that country will be restored. And an illegal occupation, if it's a country comes in and occupies another country without a war having taken place or without the people's consent, So, but it's still legal or illegal. In other words, it's a legal terminology. Usurpation is simply the taking over. It's piracy. It's hijacking. It's taking over with no laws involved. In occupation, there are laws involved. You take over a country because you've defeated them in war. So now it's legal for you to take over that country or to occupy it for a while. But in usurpation and all that it means there was no legality to it at all. There's no legal format that a country could be used. For instance, after World War II, the United States defeated Japan. It goes in and occupies Japan. But it's always with the purpose of restoring Japan to its own governance, right? And they always enforce Japanese laws. So that's an occupation, and it's a legal occupation. An illegal occupation would be if they went in and enforced U.S. laws, which is what the U.S. is doing here.
So an illegal occupation is basically usurpation.
Not necessarily. No, usurpation is even worse because an illegal occupation presumes that there was a war or some kind of conflict that took place and that this other country is now.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Now, it's not a hard and fast rule, but that's what it presumes or it assumes.
It has a little bit more context to it rather than just coming in, breaking into a house.
Yeah.
And just...
Exactly. And so what we have is a home invasion.
It's like, so basically for people, I think this is the best analogy I can think of. It's Captain Phillips where those pirates took over Tom Hanks' ship. Just randomly, just boom. By force. Yeah. I'm the captain now.
Right. Okay. So actually the most appropriate term is piracy.
Piracy.
Yeah. Piracy on the high seas.
Wow. Okay.
Which is definitely a crime. And so that's the other part. An occupation is not necessarily a crime, but usurpation, piracy, these are crimes.
Okay. So in 1893, we were usurpated? Is that the correct word?
Usurped.
Usurped.
Yeah. It was kind of a slow one. Actually, what happened, there was a coup d'etat.
Yeah.
Right. And then the U.S. assisted in it, which was an illegal act on their part. But the usurpation comes when you take over the government. So the coup moves very quickly into the provisional government, which is a usurpation. And then that moves into the Republic of Hawaii, which is still a usurpation. And then moves into annexation, which is another form of usurpation by another party as well.
Wow. So all these terms, I feel like, get lost in people's heads.
Yeah.
So it's really good that you're defining them.
But just look at one of it could be legal or is defined in legal terms. The other is basically piracy, hijacking. It's a crime.
Okay. Yeah. And what is the difference between that and annexation?
Oh, and annexation is a legal acquisition of a foreign country.
Okay, so in
this case,
1893, we were, according to American eyes, we were occupied, we're overthrown, but we were actually usurped. And then in 96, is that when we were annexed? In 98, and we were annexed. Okay. Yeah. By the United States of America.
But we were actually not an annex. They pretended and they used the term.
It was a fake annexation.
It was a fake annexation.
Oh, man.
Because they did not, the only way you can annex a foreign territory is through a treaty. And there was no treaty. They tried. So they tried, but they failed twice in 1897 for a treaty to get
I remember that.
approved. Because Hawaiians put up such a big fuss. the Ku'e petition.
Yes.
And
yes.
Liliuokalani was already in Congress, in Washington, lobbying Congress. And Congress knew they couldn't do this. This is totally illegal and the other thing is a treaty requires two sides to sign. So who is the second side? The United States could be one side, but who is the second side? A fake government, the Republic of Hawaii, or the Hawaiian Kingdom. And neither side signed any treaty of annexation. So there's no treaty of annexation. So what the United States did was they resorted to a joint resolution of Congress, which is a statement saying we would like to annex Hawaii. That's all that is. It has no force of law to carry out an annexation. But the U.S. used that, had a celebration at Iolani Palace, and said Hawaii is now annexed.
Like they were celebrating, like we were supposed to be happy, right?
Yeah, right.
After holding our queen at gunpoint, and
So the 1898, after the treaty gets defeated, Hawaiians celebrate because now we cannot be annexed. Then the U.S. moves in and annexes us anyway, or they take us anyway. And so this is a usurpation. This is not an annexation.
Yeah. Okay. And I was going to ask this later, but I'll just ask this right now. So would you say you're American?
No.
And is because of everything you're talking about right now?
Yes. I'm Hawaiian Kingdom subject by birth.
So on paper, a lot of us were American by nationality. Yeah. Citizenship.
Right.
So you wouldn't say you're American by citizenship?
I was at one point.
Yeah.
But I decided I'm not anymore. Yeah. Back in the 90s. Yeah.
Interesting. We're American by gunpoint. That's the best answer I heard from one of my uncles.
Yeah. American by force. American by gunpoint. But that's a really interesting question that you raise, though, because if the annexation was not genuine, and it wasn't, then statehood could not be genuine either, and it isn't. Therefore, what country were we actually born in? We were actually born in the Hawaiian Kingdom because it was never extinguished. It actually still lives. So you and I were born in the Hawaiian Kingdom. Everybody who was born here in Hawaii was born in the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Does that make them Hawaiian?
It could, by birth.
There's always the debate.
But what happened along the way was many of us surrendered without intending to do so. Surrendered our Hawaiian nationality by becoming U.S. citizens. So when we sign documents saying, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, then you actually switched your country. But again, most of that was by trickery, which is not, you can't be held to it in court or something like that. So what we need to do is for Hawaiians to identify themselves as being Hawaiian nationals or Hawaiian Kingdom subjects, and by doing so, also say, I'm not American. So, Haunani K. Trask.
Yeah, the classic line.
Famous line.
Yeah.
I am not American. We are not Americans.
Yeah, we are Hawaiian. We will die Hawaiian.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So she was absolutely right. And she started something there by declaring that. A lot of us go, what?
Yes, wait,
exactly. How dare you say that?
This is some radical, crazy lady just screaming things.
Yeah.
But because she knew all this information, right?
Right, yeah. Well, she knew that Hawaii was not part of the United States. And as did many other people, by the way. The resistance never ended. It continued. It just was so small and so covered over by the territory of Hawaii and then the state of Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to talk more about this specific thing, but I want to get to the Instagram questions first, and then we'll go back into it. House of Fragrant Flower wants to know, was Hawaii given to the UN by the U.S. as a deal upon the U.S. joining the UN?
This is a really interesting question. No, Hawaii was not given to the U.S. by the UN. That's what the question was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because we were part of the U.S., so it kind of, I guess, like...
Well, actually, but it's because, no, we weren't given, but we were actually, the UN was misled into surrendering Hawaii to the United States, and that was in the statehood vote of 1959. So what happened in Hawaii's case? Okay, we were never our sovereignty was never extinguished, but the U.S. had pretended that they annexed Hawaii, and they went through 60 years. All these wars, World War I, World War II. As if Hawaii was part of the United States.
Because they wanted to use us for our territory and like the naval bases.
Base. That was the primary use, yeah.
Okay.
And if you go back to doctrine of discovery, they can actually take a non-Christian country for any reason. So that's how the U.S. was doing it. So World War II, of course, Hawaii becomes extremely, well, first of all, it starts World War II because the U.S. military bases here become an irresistible, a must-strike target by the Japanese. If they're to succeed at all, they have to take out Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we're in that same situation today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
With Ukraine and Russia?
If China.
Oh, China.
If we ever go to war against China or Russia, they have to take out Hawaii. First strike. There's no question about it. Because this is the headquarters for the Indo-Pacific Command, which is a half of the surface of the globe.
Wow.
So all of the navies and military in the Pacific and Indian Ocean is under this command. And so we, if they have to take out this command center, and the only way to do so is through nuclear weapons. A sudden nuclear strike, just like the sudden attack of Japan on December 7, 1941.
Yeah.
But this time it's a sudden nuclear strike. Back in 2018, we found out how much lead time we have. 18 minutes or 15 minutes, something like that.
That's crazy.
Before a missile strikes, before when it's detected and it strikes. The missiles are faster now. They got hypersonics. The warheads are bigger. There are multiple warheads. So this missile can just pop open like a piñata above Hawaii, and each one of those nuclear warheads can explode, taking out the entire island.
Wow.
One missile.
That's so sad.
And it doesn't have to be fired from China. They've got submarines out in the ocean, parked 150 miles away.
Dang. It's like I feel like we're such nice, peaceful people here, and we're just getting thrown right in the middle of this war.
And that's what happened in World War II as well. The reason that Hawaii gets attacked or is a military target is because the U.S. has parked their military here. And basically we're being used as decoys,
just like everything else, we're just being used. For commercial, for the brand of Hawaii.
So this is one of the issues that we continue to raise at the United Nations. That the United States is putting our entire population at risk of being annihilated, not just hurt, but annihilated.
What kind of power does the UN have over the United States?
Not much. But the interest. So the question had to do with, did the UN give us over? So what happened was that in 1946, after World War II, everybody's elated about having the Allies having won the war, which I think was a good thing, and so the United Nations is formed. Now there had been an organization called the League of Nations, started by Woodrow Wilson in 2014, in 1914, but that obviously failed with World War II, and so they started up this new organization to create peace, and that was called the United Nations. In 1945, they discussed it. In 1946, it actually came into being. And the main purpose of the United Nations was to settle all disputes through peaceful means. No more wars. Okay, so a big, noble thing. The second thing was to decolonize the world, because at that point, more than half of the world was colonized. And so all of Africa, Southeast Asia, I wouldn't say more than half the world, but a good part was colonized. So they created a system to decolonize countries, a peaceful and procedure to do this. And they called it decolonization. And the decolonization process required that every country that had colonies submit the names of those colonies, and that they had now a sacred duty to assist those countries into coming to the point where they could determine for themselves what kind of governance they want for themselves in the future. Okay, so this is a very noble thing that the UN is doing. And lo and behold, a few of the countries take them up on it, and they become decolonized. And the UN acknowledges that, and they become members of the United Nations. But the process is going to kind of slow. So in 1959, so in 1946, when the list was compiled, the U.S. put in Hawaii, Alaska, Guam, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and one more.
So like all their territories.
All their territories, so-called territories. Plus, they had control and responsibility for what was called the Trust Territories of the Pacific, Micronesia, which was taken from Japan. So after World War II, Hawaii gets put on this list of what they call non-self-governing territories. These are countries or territories to be decolonized. So all of a sudden, Hawaii's on this list. Hey, that's kind of neat. Only the U.S. never tells Hawaiians what this means, us in Hawaii. And most of us would not have recognized it anyway. Right after World War II, everybody was American here in Hawaii. It was a huge thing to be American. And it continued all the way up to statehood. And that's why statehood was approved, because everyone thought we not only were Americans, but we deserved to be part of the U.S. And so they had an election in 1959. So what had happened was that there were countries that were becoming decolonized after 1946, but it was kind of a slow process. So the UN wanted to hurry it up. So in 1959, they began talking about creating an actual committee in the United Nations to assist and to handle the decolonization process. And so in 1960, they passed a resolution to create the Decolonization Committee. And 1961, it goes into effect. The U.S., back in 1958, looks at it and said, okay, this is going to be dangerous for us, because in this, we're going to lose Hawaii and Alaska if there is an actual formula on how this is supposed to happen. So they conduct a referendum in Alaska. They conduct a referendum in 1958. In 1959, they conduct a referendum here in Hawaii. They call it plebiscite. And those plebiscites, the results of that is that over 90% of the people of Alaska and the people of Hawaii vote for statehood, to become included into the United States. In other words, we give up any aspirations for independence or anything else. Only the U.S. never told us what that vote meant. It never told us we now surrender our independence or our anyway, and never told Alaskans that.
Yeah. So we wanted to become a state at that point.
Well,
but not knowing the consequences.
Yes. So there was only one actual. There were three questions, but there was only one that pertained to to Hawaii, and that was, should Hawaii immediately become a state of the United States? And that was what was presented to the people of Hawaii.
But they didn't know what that meant, becoming a state.
Well, they knew what becoming a state was, and a lot of people wanted to, but they didn't know there was any other option. That you could also choose.
you could check no.
Yeah. Well, if you check no, that meant you remained a territory. Yeah. So, and there were quite a few who checked no, but the overwhelming majority checked yes. So this is where the problem lies, is that you cannot have a referendum with only one choice on the ballot. That's no choice at all. And especially since you're supposed to prepare the people to make a decision in self-determination. And if you don't prepare the people, then you're depriving them of an actual informed consent, right? And so the United States did not inform us that there was a possibility of independence or this other thing called free association, which is an independent country but associated with the United States. That's what Micronesia voted for, and Marshall Islands and like that. So they voted for free association. But anyway, but the United States reported that both Hawaii and Alaska in 1959, they reported to the UN decolonization, well, to the General Assembly, because the decolonization committee was not yet in place. They report to the General Assembly, Hawaii. They're not going to report on Hawaii's preparations for self-governance anymore because they had decided they're going to become part of the United States. And they registered, or they report with the United Nations. The United Nations rubber stamped it without even checking on it and said, okay, then that political situation, the political status of Hawaii is now settled. Hawaii is part of the United States. And that meant all of the members of the United Nations acknowledged that. Okay. Now, the problem was, there are two problems. One, there was only a single question on the ballot, and the people were uninformed about the question. The second one was the wrong people voted. You had to be a U.S. citizen to vote in that election. And everybody in Hawaii who voted in that election considered themselves a U.S. citizen. You can't vote on the independence or on a referendum for decolonization by having the foreigners vote. So our people, the foreigners in Hawaii voted because they were U.S. citizens, and Hawaiians voted, but they were foreigners. They were U.S. citizens. They were not Hawaiian Kingdom subjects. So technically, there were two major problems or disqualifications for this vote. One, only one question. Two, the wrong people voted.
Yeah.
Not a single Native Hawaiian or Hawaiian national or Hawaiian Kingdom subject voted in that election because they were excluded. Same thing with the Alaskans.
Wow. That sounds like America. You're so sneaky.
Very sneaky. Extremely clever in how they did this.
Yeah.
Because nobody noticed.
It's definitely not an accident.
Nobody noticed.
Intentional.
The UN did not notice, that they had pulled this fast one.
Yeah.
But the good thing is this is what we're addressing now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the United Nations committed fraud, but the UN made a mistake as a result of the fraud. So this is where I'm spending almost all of my time, is getting the United Nations to review the action they took in 1959 when they approved the United States report and relegated Hawaii to be part of the United States. Because that was a false election. The report was false, and they knew it was false. Just like going back to the annexation was false, the overthrow was false. All of these things. So what happens is that now, if the United Nations reviews the action they took and find they made a mistake, they are under their own rules and regulations to rescind that resolution that they adopted.
Do you think it's possible? Do you think that we're too far gone that we can't reverse what has happened?
Actually, no. Mainly because since 1946, when the UN was founded, there were 51 countries in the United Nations. Today, there are 193. So almost 3/4 of the United Nations today were not there at the beginning. So how did they come about? Struggles for independence, decolonization, countries falling apart like the Soviet Union, and these countries springing forward. So almost 3/4 of the countries had an experience like ours, where at one time they were captive, and now they're independent. Guess who they sympathize with? Us. So So if we can keep this vote in the General Assembly, where it is right now, because it was the General Assembly that made the mistake. If we can keep it in that discussion and the vote in the General Assembly, we have almost 3/4 of the United Nations on our side.
I feel like the U.S. they'll pull something out their sleeve.
They'll
like
try, and
they'll do something, right?
And they've been successful so far. The success they've had is whenever we try a full frontal attack on this, like Keanu Sai has, these different lawsuits that he's. When you try that, they basically have a place to hide, and they hide behind the United Nations resolution that the world considers Hawaii a part of the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the official stand of all of the international community. But if that official stand is now vacated, then
no
official
protection.
community, the United States has nobody backing them on that claim. Not only that, they admitted they took Hawaii wrongfully.
Yeah.
In 1993.
Yeah.
And not only that, they admitted the overthrow was illegal.
Yeah.
And they've admitted all this, and they write up resolutions all the time saying, because of such and such, we're doing this.
Yeah. That's the craziest thing
they
to me.
created the Office of Foreign Affairs because of that. So anyway, the United States has no place to hide once this goes forward. Now, whether or not they will actually do it is another case, but they cannot do it legally. They cannot say that they're here legally anymore. And we can take, at that point, once the resolution is removed, we can take Keanu can take whatever cases he wants to the World Court, any place else. They'll have to hear it. Mm-hmm. Right now, they don't hear it because it's the legal question was settled, and it's not in the political question was settled. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a little bit more I want to talk to.
Okay.
To you about before diving more into that, because I have so many questions I want to ask. But let's just get to this. Cousin_Willie wants to know, what does our original flag look like? And I want to expand on this because we kind of talked about it. I think a lot of people have misconceptions of our flag. Well, so there's this flag that I have on my shirt right now, which is the one with the Union Jack and then the stripes like the American flag. And then there's the red, green, and yellow flag, which a lot of people think, oh, that's the original Hawaiian flag, but really we say that's like the sovereign flag, where it was more part of a movement, right? Then it wasn't an actual flag, right? And what was there a flag before this?
There are several flags of the monarchs themselves. You see those flying.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Is that the original flag? The one with
the red, green, and yellow one?
Not the red, green, and yellow one, but it's more like I want to say coat of arms or...
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the different monarchs had their own flags. So I'm not sure which ones are which.
Okay. So would you say this is the original Hawaiian flag?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The one that...
Now, some dispute the arrangement of the colors, but that's, as far as I'm concerned, the original one.
Okay. And what do you have to say about the red, green, and yellow one?
Oh, that was actually invented. Yeah, the person is Gene Simeona, and he did that in the 1990s. Thought it'd be good to pull together all of these different elements that represent Hawaii. I love the flag, by the way. I think it's beautiful. But it was actually created recently.
In the 90s, wow.
Yeah.
The more you know. Okay. Ua Keaulana wants to know, are land titles transferred after the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom legal?
No, they were not.
Okay, like it goes back to everything you just said.
Yes.
It was all fake and...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. CanadaTribe.la wants to know, what does he think about the changes happening with development of Hawaii, and does he believe natives will be able to save Hawaii from the major developments / new bills?
Yes, well, that's going to be a very challenging part of our nation. Once we take over our nation or regain control of our own nation, it's solving a lot of the problems that were created by overdevelopment and things like that, housing and things like that. But again, if we step back and we look at it, it depends on what the driver is as far as when I look at our nation and I look outside around, that is our nation, what we're looking at today. I woke up in the Hawaiian Kingdom this morning. You know, I'm breathing my breaths in the Hawaiian Kingdom. This is the Hawaiian Kingdom. And all the things around us is the Hawaiian Kingdom. So what I'm looking at is when the huli comes, and that there's lots of discussion as to how that's going to happen. But when that does come, it's a change of management. It's not a total rebuild of the entire infrastructure. You know, so, and what happens in a change of management is you have a different managerial philosophy. So whereas the U.S. one is rooted in the doctrine of discovery, which is exploitation and making more money,
greed. Yes.
Yeah, greed. I mean, that really is the symbol of the doctrine of discovery and the symbol of what happened here in Hawaii as a result of that. So what if we no longer have greedy people running our country? What if we have, you know, like our ali'i were, people who served their people and wanted to do what's best. And
for the people, not
for
themselves.
The people. Yeah, yeah. You look at the ali'i trusts today, you know, what other countries are there that, in Great Britain, for instance, that have a trust left to support a hospital system, left to support education, like Kamehameha, or left to support family services like Liliu o Kalani, you know, or elderly services like Luna Lilo. You know, so our ali'i actually cared about our people. So if we have a group of people in Hawaii, leaders who care for the people more than they care for money or whatever, I think we would have a whole different looking nation, not maybe physically looking different, but operating in a much different spirit. And so taking care of our people is going to be high priority. Feeding ourselves is going to be high priority. Being independent in all ways, so we're not dependent on any other place or country and all that.
Yeah, so like food security.
Right, way up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because right now, 90% of everything we have here is imported. We can be
starved into submission right now.
We don't get shipped for 2 weeks, we probably starve.
Yes. Well, we'll start rioting at that point. and then the starvation will come within 2 or 3 weeks after.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but we're so vulnerable right now. So an independent country needs to be invulnerable.
Yeah.
Or let's say not vulnerable to outside forces.
Yeah. So you think the only way for us to stop this major development, to, you know, get back to sustainability is by being independent, being sovereign?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why it's so important. That's what drives you.
Right.
Because to you, it's a life or death kind of thing.
It is. Yeah. It's for the survival of our people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Because we are so close on the verge of destruction, either through nuclear warfare or other means, starvation, things like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, however, the good thing is that we can do this.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing are signs, not just signs, but evidence and enthusiasm in our community, like people like yourself and the guests that you have on. Basically, we're saying we can handle this. You know, we can be a sovereign nation. We can solve our own problems. We can work. We can take care of each other like we're supposed to.
Yeah. We're like the next wave of the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been going, but the tide is rising now.
It is.
It's just rising and rising.
And I am so elated by the young people like your generation coming up, because you actually were not grown up. You weren't raised being captive.
We had this freedom.
You know about the freedom.
Yes.
We had to discover it.
Well, it goes back to our respecting our kupunas and learning the history. You know, without hearing this history, you have no desire to go back to what we used to have. You know, it doesn't pull at your heartstrings, knowing that, you know, we were overthrown. All this injustice occurred to our families. You know, we have people living here for generations that have been displaced. We have family living in the mainland, all over, you know, the different parts of the continent. And, you know, unless it affects you personally, I don't think you really feel that need to, to do something. You don't feel that kuleʻa on it. Even if you're not like native Hawaiian, you don't have this innate feeling to do something.
Right.
But just being around this generation and surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded and being inspired by other people doing things and creating these movements, then it encourages people like me, people like other people in my generation to do something. And that is all because of the people in front of us, like you, Haunani Kid Trask, that have paved the path for us. Right?
Yes. And what's going on today, like Mauna Kea, for instance, the Kukia'i Mauna movement up there was so amazing because, like you were saying, unless people are personally challenged by something, they don't do anything. Most of the people up there, they weren't going to be challenged, by the telescope. I mean, it wasn't going to affect their lives in any way. But they were there for a principle that Hawaii is still a sovereign country and nobody asked permission.
Yeah.
And so I think that the turnout there, as well as the turnout on all of the supportive activities since then and continuing still, is really the evidence of our nation rising and coalescing into not just a movement, but really a aloha aina into people who love the land and will aloha each other and support each other.
Yeah.
You get people having demonstrations here, and 150 people show up, to kako with them.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is a really good sign of the spirit of our nation, and we can do this. We can do this even in light of what's going on around the world with all of the massive, power plays and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I believe we can do our thing here.
Awesome. It's good to hear that, because for somebody who kind of from the outside doesn't understand everything as in depth as you, it seems kind of futile. Like, is this even possible? It's so small. The people who are heavily involved in this movement, it's such a small population of all of us, But it goes back to, like, if we all came together, then we could make a difference instead of just kind of supporting from the outside. But yeah, it is really, really inspiring and encouraging to see all these movements. But I just want to say mahalo to all the people that left these great Instagram questions. So make sure you leave some for the next episode, and maybe your question will make it on the podcast. It's definitely a hard thing to talk about over and over again when nothing happens. But like you said, it seems like it takes a while, nothing's just going to be changed overnight.
We've made tremendous progress. I mean, starting in the 1970s, what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's still so early. It's 50 years only.
Actually, yeah.
Since the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that long ago already.
You still look good. They say, you ever heard of the saying, Asian don't raisin?
No.
That's how we stay so young. Mahalo to all our Asian ancestors.
Well, and among other things, immunity that they brought to our people. Most Hawaiians today are part Chinese.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them are part Japanese too. But the immunity of the Chinese actually assisted us getting over that huge. Otherwise, we'd be totally gone.
Yes, true. Okay. I want to ask you this question. This is a very important question that we've been all trying to discover what the actual meaning of this is. So maybe you can give us your thoughts, your mana'o. What does it mean to be Hawaiian? What does that mean to you?
Okay. A very good question. Hawaiian, to me, means a number of different levels. One is the Kanaka Maoli level, of course, of which I am happily a part of. But the other part and broader is those whose hearts are with and in Hawaii. Aloha aina. That's Hawaiian to me. And so Hawaiian is a very inclusive thing, like I was saying earlier. Hawaiian culture, deep cultural values is to be inclusive. And so to me, a Hawaiian is a person who loves Hawaii. That's it.
Just as simple as that. Whether you have the blood or not.
Yes.
What about the saying Hawaiian at heart? I've heard a lot of, that's a very controversial thing to say. Hawaiian at heart.
Yeah, it'd be more like aloha aina. I think that's a much better phrase to use.
Love for the land.
Love for the land.
So if you love
for
Hawaii,
this place, yeah, and the land means not just the land, or aina means not just the land, but this place and everything that goes into it. It's the air, it's the water, it's everything else. That's the aina.
It's each other. We're part of it. And I think if people shifted their perspective and saw the land as their home, then they wouldn't treat it so poorly.
Yes.
It's like, why would you throw rubbish in your home? You wouldn't do that in your home, so why would you do it on the land, outside, at the beach, at a park? I think going back to seeing Hawaii as our home, not just a physical roof over our head, but as like part of us, as our heart, ourselves, then I think that's the best way for us to move forward and reclaim our Hawaiian-ness.
Right, right.
Yeah. Awesome. What about Hawaiian nationality versus Hawaiian blood? Because I've heard arguments that they said if people were born here, they were Hawaiian at one point. I don't know at what year that was, but did you hear something like that?
Prior to the overthrow, well, of course, Hawaiian nationality relates to more of a legal term, right? What country you have allegiance to, and so Hawaiian citizens or subjects were all kinds of different races comprised Hawaiian subjects. So Chinese who were here during the monarchy and felt loyal to the queen or to the king, they were Hawaiian subjects, and they were part of it. It was inclusive. And then, of course, when the overthrow took over, when the Republic of Hawaii was formed, then they required everybody in the Republic of Hawaii required people to pledge allegiance to that republic, and so about 4,000 people did so. And that was the voter base for the Republic of Hawaii, which means in a population of, at that time, 90,000 people in Hawaii, a very small minority were actually considered the Republic of Hawaii. Of course, when the U.S. took over, then it shifted everyone's, although it wasn't supposed to, in the Organic Act and all, it didn't actually, it said the Hawaiians maintain their nationality, but just through practical means, you had to survive. So people became U.S. citizens or identified with the U.S. and then eventually became U.S. citizens. So today, Hawaiian nationality is basically those people who, one, were born in the Hawaiian Kingdom, and secondly, and this is still the Hawaiian Kingdom, by the way. So we're born here, and then secondly, those who actually have naturalized themselves, that is, that have basically are pledging allegiance. Now, naturalization is an actual formal legal action to take, and we don't have that system in place yet. So for now, a Hawaiian national will be a person who is born here,
even if they don't have the blood.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should.
But also one who is willing to accept Hawaiian nationality. In other words, U.S. citizens born here and remaining U.S. citizens are not Hawaiian nationals. You have to identify yourself at one point as being a Hawaiian national and not an American.
So you got to separate those two.
Yeah.
You can't be both.
Yeah.
Well, what about like dual citizenship? Is that not the same?
Dual citizenship is a fairly recent phenomenon. Back in the Hawaiian Kingdom, there was no such thing as dual citizenship. So we're adopting the same thing. There's no such thing as dual citizenship, at least until some time when we can alter our constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom or whatever nation this is, until you can alter the Constitution to accept dual citizenship.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for that is you get dual citizenship, you also have dual allegiances. And what we don't want is people confused about their allegiance, particularly U.S. citizens in Hawaii, who also claim that they're Hawaiian nationals, but will flip-flop back and forth according to their own, their own advantage.
Okay, cool. I want to know your thoughts on, so another argument that people say when they're like, oh, well, when we said that we were overthrown by the U.S. government, they're like, well, if it wasn't the U.S., it would have been Japan, it would have been France, it would have been somewhere else. What do you have to say about that? Because do you think at some point, if it wasn't the U.S., we would have been colonized by somewhere else? And adding to that too, what do you think the pros and cons of being sovereign are?
Okay. My answer is I don't know. I mean, the thing.
It's a very honest answer.
What we do know is that the United States invaded.
We talk about what we know.
Yes. I doubt whether China, which was in no position to take over another country, or Japan, at that time was going to try to grab Hawaii. Those were the only two obvious ones. Now, that narrative was from a popular narrative that was used by the U.S. for their Asian Exclusionary Act. In other words, they saw the inclusion of Asians into the U.S. population as being a threat. And so they constantly harped on this whole thing about Asia wants to do this and that. Like they said, Asians were going to take over California because there were so many Asians there.
There are a lot of Asians all over the world, though. I have to say, everywhere I've went, there's a lot.
But what they were saying, they should take Hawaii. I mean, and this was, by the way, a tertiary reason. The first one was we're there because Hawaii asked us to come there. That was their first thing, and then behind the whole thing was greed, of course. And the secondary one was that we need Hawaii to help protect the United States interests, right, in the Pacific. And so the idea, the thing that sells them, rather than saying we're greedy and we want Hawaii, they have to say we're there to protect Hawaii from the invasion of Asians, because Asians were real bad guys in those days. And so this was the boogeyman.
Yeah.
And so they wave that around. In fact, the interesting thing about the treaty or the Newlands Resolution, which was used as if it was a treaty of annexation, that was never signed by the Republic of Hawaii, the Newlands Resolution, because the Republic of Hawaii said, if we signed this and came under the U.S. laws, then we would have to exclude Asians. But they're a vital part of our community. They're our workforce here in Hawaii. We're not going to exclude Asians out of Hawaii. So they actually refused to sign that because they did not want to oust or prevent Asians from coming into Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So it's a lot of information to take in, and we're coming to the end of the podcast, and I want to get shift gears a little bit, but last things I want to ask about, sovereignty and this is, what do you think is the biggest challenge for us in reclaiming our sovereignty?
Okay, there are actually two, and we're working on both. The first biggest challenge is convincing ourselves here in Hawaii that sovereignty is desirable and achievable. And I see that growing. So we're much better off now than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But we still have a way to go. So it's really basically getting ourselves convinced and getting our minds fixed on that. One of the ways we do that is start to just rearrange the thinking that we had become accustomed to, the habits that we have, like using the word mainland, for instance. That to me, that is, it seems innocuous and minor, but it actually is a reinforcing agent for our minds. This great South African activist and writer, Stephen Biko, said one time, he said, the most potent weapon of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed.
That's just like saying mainland, thinking that is the main land.
Exactly.
And then what are we?
Yeah. And it's a minor thing, but it's actually so reinforcing. It's so habit forming.
It's psychological.
So if you stop and you start to stop yourself every time you say mainland, then what does that do? You actually have to think about it initially. Later, you just drop it. But initially what that does, it helps you convince yourself, we're not part of that land.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say? Because I've heard that before, and that's why I try to correct myself saying the continent.
I say the States.
The States.
The U.S. Them.
Them. those other guys.
Those other guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So, what was the other question you asked?
I just asked the biggest challenge, and you said there was two. Yeah, the second part of that.
The second one is convincing the world that Hawaii is still a sovereign nation.
Yes.
Now, the good thing is that everybody loves Hawaii. So we have them on our side already. I get into a cab in New York, I'm driving along, and cab asks me, where are you from? And I said, from Hawaii. Oh, all of a sudden his whole countenance changes. He gets all excited, and he talks about wanting to go there or having gone there to his niece's wedding or something. I mean, everybody you talk to loves Hawaii. And the question is, what do they love Waikiki? Do they love No, there's something about Hawaii that they love. So there's something already attractive to them. And I believe it's aloha. Aloha itself has gone out and has preconditioned people to love love us and our place. So we have that on our side. Mm-hmm. So if we portray that Hawaii is being what's the term?
Usurpated.
Usurpated. Yeah. Has been usurped, or has been exploited. That's the word I was looking for. Being exploited by America. All of a sudden people see the whole thing in a different way. Mm. So we can change the minds of the public, the general public, including the minds of those people who are in official positions such as the United Nations, European Union, Islamic, African Union. There are lots of these international organizations that we actually are real close to flipping to understanding. And the interesting thing is that the U.S. has put itself into such a position of dislike by other nations that actually they wouldn't put it past U.S. to have pulled a fast one like this over Hawaii. And so all of a sudden they're on our side. Yeah. So we just need to get the message out. And the best way to do that is social media.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
So this is what we need to do. We need to speak constantly and favorably about Hawaii becoming an independent nation. Mm. And this will take root all around the world.
Yeah, I'm sure people are listening to this feeling very inspired, educated, and at the end of the day, it comes down to education. Yeah, it's you don't care about what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So once you find out about this, it triggers something inside of you. It depends how close you are to the situation. Like for me, hearing all of this, I've been hearing it all my life, but to get to know the details, have this conversation, this one-on-one conversation, and just dive into it head first. It does make me feel pride in being Hawaiian, and not anger, but just this feeling where I feel like we should be doing more, or I wish people could see what we see. It's like trying to convince everybody like you have the greatest idea ever. To you, in your head, it's the best thing. Nobody can touch it.
Yeah.
But trying to convince other people to think the same is the hardest thing.
Yeah, but again, we don't all have to be lawyers or educators or academics and things like that.
We do need those people, and we do need the
yes,
people in DC
and we have
fighting.
choke people.
Yeah,
Like that.
yeah.
But we also have people who do things.
Mm-hmm.
So every time I see some new hui putting together a project to plant taro, a community ahupua'a type of project, I go, okay, that is independence.
Mm-hmm.
That is an actual action we're taking. And there's hundreds of them going around right now.
Mm-hmm.
So many, I have no clue how many, but I just know that everyone is thinking in terms of sovereignty, independence, and doing it by action. Fishing, house building, whatever they're doing, they're doing it as a service to the nation, as Lahui. And I think that this is great because that's how we need to think.
Yes.
We're thinking like Lahui.
Yes. We got to be inclusive. It's a kako thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening, and it makes me really excited. Cool. Well, mahalo so much for sharing all your knowledge, your ike on all these subjects. I want to just end the podcast by talking about you a little bit more.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap up and grab some lunch or some smoothies after. I want to know how you want to be remembered, when it's all said and done. I feel like you've done a lot. I mean, you got your music career, you got your work that you're doing for our Hawaiian Kingdom, father, husband. What would you want to be remembered for?
Wow, that's a very difficult question. I think mostly for my music, because in a way, even though a lot of people have been exposed to it, a lot of people don't really know what kinds of music I've been involved in, like the recording with the London Symphony Orchestra, the first and only recording by Hawaiian with a major symphony orchestra in the world. You know
what I think? I think if you were ahead of your time, I think if you've done all of that in the age of social media, everyone would know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, again, the music, because of the children. Again, happened upon this whole thing because some father wanted his children to remember they were Hawaiians. But it affected now going on 4 generations of children. They grew up on the music.
Yeah, my niece is learning through that.
We added to Mokulana, we added Keiki Calabash and Hawaii Kids Calabash, another one called Ho'olako Hawaii, all children's music. It's never been replicated. Nobody else has done this. And so our music is practically the only children's music available. Yeah. And we saw that as a huge responsibility, that this is our opportunity to train up children to think that they are living in Hawaii, that they are part of Hawaii. And I like to think that we've had an impact, that the change that we've seen of of young people over the last 30, 40 years has a lot to do with the fact that we help to inculcate in them a spirit and a joy for Hawaii and things Hawaiian.
Yes. Yeah. Mahalo for doing that. It's so important to be able to leave your legacy and to have it live forever because of the internet, Yeah, these videos, that's amazing. Okay. What is something you wish people knew about you that they don't?
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a very difficult one because
or I could
I'm not sure.
If I can change it a little bit, I could say, what is one thing you wish people knew about Hawaiians or people like us, people fighting for sovereignty, that they don't know?
Yeah. What I'd like for them to know is that Hawaiians are a unique people, and not that no one else is. We are unique amongst ourselves, and we have a style and character, an internal trait, and that's aloha. And that aloha is really real, and that it can be applied to every situation. And that aloha causes us to view things in a different framework or from a different perspective. So when our people revert to that core part of us, which is aloha, and we can do almost anything. When we adopt too many outside influences and outside notions, it actually hampers us from being who we are. So the identification of us as being a people of aloha, I think, needs to be cultivated and practiced daily. And we just do that and do that. And this is going to multiply and become a huge, I wouldn't say a movement, but a huge force. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Mahalo, that's very beautiful. Okay, this is the last thing that I'd like to ask my guests. Before I got some quick rapid fire questions.
Okay.
But I think I actually forgot to remind you for a life hack. I usually tell my guests to come prepared for a life hack, and I think I forgot to tell you a life hack. But if you can pull one up right now.
Define
a life hack, like something that makes your life easier. It could be funny. It could be a serious one, like some past life hacks were cleaning while you cook. Or Tammy Moniz, she brought this fry thing that was like a fry wall that when you cook, it covers all the splatters. Or some other people had like a phrase that they would tell their kid to keep them, like to make them listen. So something like that.
Okay.
Life hack.
Okay. I actually kind of said it earlier. Chansum.
I like that.
I mean, whatever is in front of you, it's there for a reason, and don't shy away from it, or don't get too pretentious either. But go forward with it, move forward. Yeah. Imua, yes.
Mm-hmm, yes. Any opportunity, chance them.
Yeah.
Don't be scared.
Yeah. And that's how I got into a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Because you weren't afraid.
Yeah. And said, okay, we can do that.
Yeah. Chance them. Shigo. Okay, awesome. All right, these are just quick 5 questions that I have for you before we end the podcast. Favorite Hawaiian food?
Lau lau.
Lau lau. Can't go wrong with that. And what do you accompany with? Got a poi, rice?
Poi, kalua.
Yeah.
Lomi salmon. Opihi. I love opihi.
Nice. Well, you're from Miloli, so
yeah,
you got all that. Gotta have that fish, that stuff from the ocean. Okay. Favorite song of yours?
On that respect, Laho'i Ho'i'ea. At the end of the day, I was in Waimanalo at Hunana Niho, and somebody brought out the opihi. This is like 8 o'clock at night, and we were barbecuing the opihi, roasting them and just having this wonderful time. It was the best.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. Those moments, those just like very casual, just like backyard style vibes.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so favorite song of yours that you've written, sung, composed?
That I've written?
I know that's a hard question. There's so many.
I mean, I constantly hear songs that are my favorites.
First thing that comes to mind.
Well, actually, this is kind of strange because I hadn't thought about this one in years, but Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon. Simon.
That's a great song. But what about one of the songs
own?
That you own?
Okay. There's one called Heartland.
Heartland.
Yeah, that we recorded in 1979. It's about our travels over America.
Is it online? Is it streamed somewhere?
Actually, no, it's not available right now.
How do we listen to it?
We'll probably put it out.
Oh, okay.
Soon. Yeah. Actually, I just recently found the master for it and had it digitized.
Awesome.
reel-to-reel master.
Yeah. You gotta share it. You gotta hear it, especially if it's your favorite. All right, favorite memory.
Wow. Oh, that's really difficult.
Yeah, I know. I'm asking all the hard questions right at the end.
Yeah.
One of your favorite memories from childhood, from recently.
Wow. Again, so many different memories.
One you just like to share with us.
I'm trying to select one. That's the difficult part.
I know. If you can't think of one, then
Well,
okay, you got one. You got one.
I could think of a couple of really little childhood ones. Okay, one was witnessing the 1951 lava flow of Mauna Loa, and we were headed toward Miloli'i, but the road was blocked because the lava flow was going across the road, and so we had parked and we were watching the lava flow, and I was 3 years old, maybe 2.5 maybe, and so all of a sudden we started running, and I saw, well, the thing that impressed me was everybody was red. It was this glowing red because we're that close to the lava flow. And anyways, everybody started to run, and this huge, and I was being carried by my aunt. So I was looking back where we were running from, So I was watching the lava flow while everybody was running, and this huge boulder came across the road right where we had been standing, and it was a big, ball of lava that rolled over the road. Anyway, that's one thing. Another thing was
so cool.
was catching puhi with my cousins in
Oh,
Miloli'i.
nice, catching eels.
Yeah, eels.
Just you had like a little net.
No, actually, you dangle a piece of fish in front, and you have a hook in the back of it, but not on it. No, it wasn't a hook; it was a lasso. And so when the eel came out, then they lassoed the neck of the puhi.
Oh, wow.
And then whipped it out of you have to do it fast, otherwise it'll attach itself to the rocks. But I remember that. I must have been 4 or 5 years old.
Wow, one of your earliest memories.
Yeah.
That's cool. And what did you do with the puhi?
Toss it up onto the shore, and then pulehu later.
Nice. Okay, awesome. What is your favorite way to spend your time?
Pardon me?
What is your favorite way to spend your time? Your free time?
Free time. I'm trying to think about free time.
What free time? I've never heard of that. What does that look like?
I mean, the work I do, stretches over different continents. So I'm up all hours doing stuff. Anyway, free time.
Or just your time, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you try to do?
Yeah, I suppose I like to go to the beach and just hang out, walk around a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you live on this island?
Yeah, I live on.
Oh, okay. Nice. What beaches do you like to go?
Kailua. Yeah, and I go down to Ala Moana too.
Oh, okay. Right on. Awesome. All right. Last one, and then we'll wrap up. Favorite myth about Hawaii?
Favorite myth?
If you know any, I thought of this question, and I thought I could maybe get a cool response from you.
Myth meaning an untrue thing, or?
Yeah, let's change, maybe story or myth. Yeah, true or untrue, fiction or non-fiction.
Favorite.
But don't tell us if it's true or not. Just tell us. Like one of my favorite stories is just how Haloa, Nakalau Kapalili, just like how we came from like the stillborn child,
right.
And that was the first tower, that's the first Hawaiian. Yeah, like I love that story.
I think my favorite is Opae. Are you familiar with the song?
Yeah, Opae.
Yeah, it's a very ancient, from a very ancient chant that talks about a young boy who has to go on a mission to rescue his sister from a puhi that had captured her and hid her in a cave. And he had to go and to rescue her. And in doing so, he goes to all the sea creatures and asks them to kokua him, to go with him, to assist him. And so he goes to all the big fierce ones first, right? The mano, you know, and tries to get them. Everybody's afraid of the puhi. They won't go. Finally, he comes to the opihi, and he asks the opihi for help. And the opihi agrees to go with him. And he's like, what can the opihi do? Right? He's going against this mo'o. And so the opihi get there, they get to the cave, the opihi go in, and they slither themselves up the side of the puhi, clamp themselves over the eyes of the puhi. And the puhi's blinded, and the boy is able to go and rescue his sister. So I love that, because the most insignificant thing, and again, opihi, which I love, becomes the hero. But it's a self-sacrifice too, because the opihi actually give themselves their lives for that.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my favorite.
I forgot about that. And then the lyrics, Nuyo Puhi
Alilio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mai makau.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. That's a childhood
So
story.
we recorded that with the London Symphony Orchestra in 1970.
I'm going to go play that later after I get into my truck. That sounds awesome. Cool. Well, that's all we have for this podcast. Mahalo so much.
This has been fun.
Yes, I wish we could talk for a couple more hours. I'm
do
sure
it
we'll stay in
time.
touch. Yeah, we might have to have a part 2 after we see what the people want. I'm sure everybody has enjoyed this. If you're listening, I think this is officially our longest podcast we've ever had. But I didn't want to end it because there's so much ike and knowledge that you're sharing with us. So mahalo. Where can we find you if people want to find you on YouTube, or your music, what you do with the Hawaiian Kingdom?
Okay, I have a Facebook page, Leon Siu. Yeah, so you can go to Facebook and look up Leon Siu. The Hawaiian Kingdom has a website, hawaiiankingdom.net. And let's see, what else?
Find them on YouTube. Just type in his name. There's interviews, Leon and Malia, the Keiki Calabash. We have so many songs.
Right, and we have a whole series for Olelo called Backstory.
Yes, I watched a little bit about that. Cool. Well, awesome. Do you have any final things you want to share?
No, just that I really appreciate where we are today. That I'm very hopeful and very optimistic about things beginning to huli very soon, like within the next year. We'll see some breakthroughs. And so mahalo for everybody, for your manao and for your kokua and for everything else. Just keep at it.
Yes, you too. We'll chance them, and we'll all succeed together. Mahalo, Leon, for joining us on the Hawaiiverse podcast. Check us out on Hawaiiverse.com, the best place to support locals. Spread aloha, be kind to one another, and mahalo for listening to us today. New episodes every Thursday, so make sure you follow us and leave a review. I'm your host, Kamaka, and you'll hear me next time on the Hawaiiverse podcast. Ahui ho.